So I mentioned the panel session, which is going to take place right now. The title of this is Supply Chains and Delivering Desired Business Outcomes in Today's Global Economy. To helm this panel session, we have Dr. Raman Krishnan, who you all saw earlier, so no need for me to give an introduction, I'm sure. And Raman will be introducing the panel himself. So Raman, over to you. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Bob. I'd like to invite my panelists. I've got the largest panel over the next 2 days. So with that, Lee Eng Kiat, Executive Director, Group Foreign Direct Investment at United Overseas Bank. Patrick Wong, the Country Manager for GoGoX. I keep wanting to say GoGo Van. Here he comes with his signature blue T-shirt. Ben Horner, Senior Vice President, Southeast Asia and the Pacific region at Siva Logistics. Mark Yong, the Managing Director, APAC and EMEA at Bloom Global. And last but not least, Mr. Martin Yu, Sales Director for the Asia Pacific region at E2 Open. So we have an all-male panel. Surprise, surprise. Yes, we are fine once we're on stage. Yes. Yeah. And try not to spit at each other, yeah? We tried not to do that for 2 years. All right. To start off, Patrick, Ben, could you help yourselves, gentlemen, to the microphone? Rather than do it myself, I'm going to ask each of you very quickly to introduce yourself and also give us some opening remarks on how you interpret this title, specifically in your area of work. We've got a very good cross-section, right? We've got GoGo Van, we've got a Siva Logistics, large multinational freight forwarder. We've got 2 technology providers, I'll leave that there, and we've got a banker or someone representing a bank. Yeah, so it's a very good cross-section. So, Patrick, introduction about yourself, and then how do you interpret this topic?
Again, thank you, LogiSYM, for inviting all of us here. I'm very honored. Good to see the crowd back. It's really a packed attendance here. So I'm Patrick, GoGoX Singapore, formerly known as GoGo Van. We're actually a technology startup in the logistics space. In Singapore, I operate 2 parts of the business. First of all, there's the app, which is the ad hoc on demand. So think of us as Uber for logistics. Be it a motorcycle or a 24-foot truck, use the app. Business can get an on-demand delivery done. On the other side of the business, we term it as enterprise. So what we do is we help shippers do their last mile delivery. So today, I'm actually speaking from a last mile perspective. Not only do we serve brands like IKEAs and StarHubs of the world to do their last mile deliveries, we also support 3PLs. So we have had projects with like Siva Logistics, FedEx, UPS, and even DHL. So we rely on our platform of delivery partners. So we have ad hoc drivers as well as the contracted dedicated drivers. So GoGoX is in 7 countries. I manage Singapore operations. I'm here with my team. It's a very interesting topic. I think the key word here is disruption, right? But my sort of take of it is sort of a polarizing effect. And when I say that is in very simplistic terms, first of all, there's a surge in demand, right? But then you get all these so-called disruptions in the entire supply chain. We have clients that want things done cheaper, right? But then I've got drivers needing more earnings because cost of everything has gone up, from COE to fuel to basic cost of living. So on that note, I think we are fortunate. I think most of us, in the supply chain here, we're doing, I guess most of us are doing well in terms of business. But on the other extreme, you have businesses out there just scraping to survive. So, I mean, my take on the topic is really polarizing.
All right. Thanks, Patrick. Ben.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Ben Horner, and I work for Seva Logistics. Seva is a logistics service provider that has ocean, air, contract logistics, and indeed ground products as the main four. I'd like to thank LogiSYM for the opportunity to come here today, and I'd also like to throw out here quickly, it's the 10-year anniversary. So these types of events for our supply chain and logistics industry are so incredibly important. I just want to say congratulations to LogiSYM, 10-year anniversary. Now, we're talking about desired outcomes. I'm going to put it in a word, tough. We're in unprecedented times at the moment, and it's very tough putting together some of these supply chain solutions. But how do we do it? And I think whether we're client-side or indeed a logistics service provider, it's about innovation. It's about continual improvement. It's about digitalization, for example. I think these are some of the absolute key topics and threads we need to be thinking about to reach the desired outcomes. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Just a courtesy reminder, we've got safe distancing ambassadors at the back of the room, and I think they would like to remind us to keep our mask on when we're seated at the table. Yeah, we're fine up here on stage, but for those of you seated at the table, please keep your mask on. Thanks, Ben.
Hey, thanks. So my name is Martin. I'm from E2 Open. So for those of you who don't know E2 Open, so E2 Open, we are actually the largest SaaS provider for the supply chain software. And we provide supply chain management systems to people along the entire end-to-end supply chain, from manufacturers to the 3PLs, logistics service providers, and to the brand owners who want to check their demand, even from the retail side as well. So my take on this topic, right, might be a bit different because I'm not from purely supply chain background. My career started in aviation and then moved into manufacturing. So when I was doing the digital transformation project for my customers in aviation, airlines, and then manufacturing companies, I can see a very clear roadmap for the digital transformation path, like Industry 4.0, like for China customers in manufacturing, they have China manufacturing in 2025. But in supply chain, surprisingly, right, we don't have a very clear path in terms of digital transformation and what we need to do in the next 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years until the COVID and all these black swan events came. So I believe this is a great catalyst for the entire supply chain industry to realize the importance of this. And I'm happy that I'm in the industry and riding the wave. Yep.
So it's forced us to act, yes, Martin? Thank you very much. Inkiat.
Thanks, Raymond. Thanks for the invitation, by the way. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Inkiat. I come from UOB. It's a global bank with a global HQ in Singapore, but our footprint really is in Southeast Asia. Now, some of us might ask, what's the bank doing with supply chain? But essentially, if you think about where global trade flows are going, and with the geopolitical tensions that lots of people have talked about, Southeast Asia is a major beneficiary. And part of the conversation that we have is how can Southeast Asia play a role in both the immediate as well as the long-term shifts in these supply chains. So from a desired outcome perspective, oftentimes with clients, we want to just get the job done in terms of setting up in Southeast Asia, and that's something that my Foreign Direct Investment Advisory Unit helps companies to do. But I think on the longer term, we also want to think about risk. And as we think about geopolitical risk and the polarized world increasingly that we face, how do you manage that, especially using Southeast Asia, is the other topic that I want to help my clients overcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Inkiat. In.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Mark Yong. I'm from Managing Director of Bloom Global based in Hong Kong, managing a broad portfolio, APAC and EMEA. But basically, I do the simple things like cold calling yourself. So I'm a glorified salesman, okay, at the end of the day. We're all wearing blue here. The beauty about being last, you don't have to be that smart. Okay, so I would like to focus on the key point, desired outcomes, desired business outcomes. Well, one of the things is managing customer expectation. We're a bunch of spoiled brats. Yeah? I used to be a scientist before. I did all this PCR stuff pre-COVID 30 years ago, so you can guess my age. But in the consumer-driven world, supply chain is just pushed to the limits. Have you lot been to the, I wouldn't like to advertise, McDonald's recently? The chips, the French fries packets getting smaller. Japan, they had issues with potatoes, importing potatoes. So the US are not bringing enough potatoes to Japan. So that's a big issue. So what do you use? You talked about this, resiliency this morning, about using different modes of transport. So Bloom, just a bit of advertisement here, because everybody talks about their companies, right? So we are a multimodal supply chain ecosystem. So we partner with ocean carriers, with railroad companies, especially in the States, and also aircraft, air freight companies. So we're able to tell customers, hey, maybe if your shipment is going to be delayed, we alert you. Maybe you have other options. I'll stop there because we can spend hours talking about it. But I think the key is managing customer expectation. Because when I buy a laptop online, I keep tracking, pressing every single minute. Do we need to do that or not? Yeah? We probably don't. But I need my food. That's more important, right? So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. So is it your customers who are spoiled brats, or is it the consumers who are spoiled brats?
We are all spoiled brats, yeah. You agree? Yeah? Your children, your kids, everything? Yeah? I want it, and I want it now. And if you look at some of the biggest retailers in the States, they penalize vendors if they're not on time in full. Is that really necessary? That's in the lean supply chain world. And I think this morning's presentation from EDB, right, it's about, well, the stress of having lean supply chain. That means that you have to really manage your inventory very carefully. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mark. So, bearing in mind that our customers are spoiled brats, I'm going to throw this question to Ben and Martin, yeah? Because you both work in organizations that have evolved quite a fair bit. SIVA with CMA CGM, E2 Open with all the acquisitions that you're making. The E2 Open today looks very different from what it was 2 years ago. So how do you, yes, as a 3PL or as a service provider, align with your customers? Martin?
Yep. So I really like the word that you use, right? Align. So what E2 Open is doing, and from the acquisitions that we had, is not align with my customers, but help our customers to aligning with their customers and their suppliers to connect the upstream and downstream of the entire supply chain, right? So how we are helping them in the way is providing the necessary software that they are going to benefit from and reduce the human errors. Yep. So that's basically
Ben?
Perfect. So we at SIVA Logistics, we are a LSP, and the middle word is service, logistics service provider. So we're absolutely focused on customer success, customer experience. I like the term before you mentioned customer expectation. So this is everything that we drive towards. Now, there is some challenges in this market, and this is all about alignment. This is all about partnership, sitting down and communicating with our clients and forecasting in the future what might be coming up. We're very, very deeply involved in innovation and the continual improvement side of things. That might be a new product. That could be a multimodal solution, for example, a new sea air model that we're doing. This is what we bring up in our MBRs and our QBRs to give that information ahead of time so that our clients can have a great understanding of what we're working on and indeed receive information back for what they want us to work on next.
Thanks, Ben. So let me ask you this, yeah? As a LSP or as a 3PL, who in SIVA's world, and of course this is open to any of you gentlemen, who do you envision or envisage is your customer? Very often you're dealing with the supply chain manager, the logistics manager, or maybe someone in operations. But in actual fact, and this is something that I tell my vendors as well, you're actually not having to sell to me. I've got my reputation capital I'm putting out there when I appoint you as a 3PL, or if I decide to work with you or adopt your technology. So how do you get into that mindset, or is that already in your DNA? Who is your actual customer? Maybe starting with you, Patrick, because the GoGoX story and about how you're profitable is quite interesting.
Okay, I think First of all, I really hope my shippers or my clients will be sitting in this room sort of to understand what's going on in the real world today. There are different expectations, especially from my clients. Again, I use the word polarizing. Some are very understanding to the situation all of us are facing, whereas the others on the other extreme are still as demanding as before. And back to your question, Ramon, about who is our customer, I would say it's my clients or the shippers' customers, because without them, there is no client and no shipper, and there's no business for us. Where we co-create, and this is part of the thing I'm going to talk about later, is we sit down with our clients to really map out the entire customer journey, or we try our best to work out the customer journey, and meet those points. Because at the end of the day, as much as we are representing or we're shipping for the shipper, it is still our brand. It's my guy wearing GoGoX t-shirt delivering. Or sometimes in the messaging, it says your delivery will be shipped by GoGoX. So to answer your question, it is the end consumer that's our customers.
Thanks. Excellent answer, Patrick. Ben?
So I see our customers as everyone. That can be internal customers, indeed, at Seva Logistics, as well as external. So let's say we run a contract logistics operation, and let's say it's for ABC company. They might engage a transport company, a domestic transport company, to do deliveries into our warehouse. I see them also as our customers. We are representing the industry, and we need to represent it at the highest professional standards. So really everyone is a potential customer.
Okay, so this is a question for Inkiat and maybe for Mark as well. Everyone likes to say, oh, APAC or EMEA or global, we're a global bank or organization. But I think we can all agree that there are certain idiosyncrasies by geography, by market segment. What are some of the observations, especially Inkiat with your background? Yeah, I think 20 odd years with EDB, yes, and then now with UOB. What are some of the idiosyncrasies or the differences that you see by country or by industry segment?
So let me start with the countries one, if you don't mind. The interesting one for me in Asia especially, it's how many Asian companies run their own supply chains and run their own logistics operations. I think the Asian conglomerates or the Asian businessmen seems to want to hold that as their own business and want to grow that on their own. So the way they view supply chains then is rather different, because if you're a 3PL, I think some of the most common questions that you have is, why don't the Asian companies themselves outsource more? But that's not the way it works. So I think that's one mentality that you need to think about. And then it goes into this MNC versus Asian company, right? Whereby the MNCs operating in Asia are willing to outsource, and I think that's where a lot of the 3PLs go after them as the business, but that's where the Asian businesses see it differently. I think the second area that I would look at in terms of the difference is really the types of new emerging industries that are out there. So the Asian companies, they are more traditional, will see this as a important part, but also something that they don't run as well and perhaps not as agile. But if you think about the Asian e-commerce firms that are increasingly emerging, the Lazadas, the Cs, and etc., the JDs, logistics is almost like a bread and butter, the area where they are pouring most of their money in order to rapidly build up a network in order to satisfy customer demands as well. So I think from the East-West, operating in Asia, from the different kinds of industries and the stage of your development, we see that range of, I guess, different approaches regarding supply chains and treating it differently.
Thanks, Inkiat.
Very good. I can say, you've answered everything. No, joking. I would say one thing is if you look at 20 years ago, if I'm in Asia, I'll make it very simple. Asia, I say the East-West, right? Once I've shipped my goods, I brush my hands off. That's it. I don't really care. Whether you receive it or not, that's your business. It's now very interconnected. So when you ship, I need to make sure that the other end gets it in time. They want to know. So it's a little bit more interconnected now. So that's the issue of the push-pull effect as well. So previously it's very independent. I've done my job, finish. The other thing I would like to go to kind of GoGoX Patrick thing, especially the last mile. A lot of issues now, not so much in Asia, but a lot in Europe and a lot of USA, lacking track and drivers. And what does that mean? There's a knock-on effect on containers and blah, blah. So knock-on effect that Even exporters in the US don't have enough containers to fill in the goods for export, and that's why we have this potato issue. So, and if I could go back to the earlier question about who's your customer, it's getting very clouded, or who do you consider as our customers? It's very clouded right now. You see the port entities are buying logistics players, yeah? And then, so that's becoming cloudy, right? And you see ocean carriers buying or having stakes in air freight companies. So who is your customer? At the end of the day, I would say, I will agree with you both that it's really at the end users, the end people. They're the kings and queens. Our sons and daughters are the kings and queens and the princess, because they will command, they will tell us. So we need to manage the expectation. So come back to that. Okay.
So you've changed your tune, yeah? They're not spoiled brats, they're kings and queens.
Okay, well, at lunchtime, I'll raise the bar even further.
So, you know, we had MP give us that presentation and the perspective from Google and about how these cutting edge, or maybe not cutting edge, but these technologies, she had very good examples, right? I think there was O&E, there was Unilever, and a few other companies. But and it's a constant argument in my house, believe me, if you know who my wife is, right? That's that 1% at the top of the pyramid. With key manufacturing countries impacted by COVID, how are MNCs really managing their affected supply chains? Is this technology widespread? Since you've got the microphone, Mark.
Yeah, that's a good point. Last time, if you look at the MNCs, right, you talk about the earlier discussion about resilience. Everybody looking at nearshoring is a question. It's not as easy as it is. So there's a fear factor of, oh, did China lock down? What's going to happen? Vietnam. I think everybody, I can see some heads nodding. It's not that easy because the MNCs already have built in their kind of so-called resilient supply chain network. It's not that resilient because you cannot just switch to, and then, well, being in Southeast Asia, we want to see probably Singapore, Indonesia, Malaysia, or Thailand instead of Vietnam benefit for the nearer, but it's not likely to happen that fast. I mean, I throw it out there for discussion. So, yeah, so it's one of the topics anyway.
Okay. Martin, your perspective.
Thanks. So I think E2Open, right? We have a lot of MNCs as our customer, right? The big manufacturer in US, and I think it's already mentioned earlier by Ankit that the culture is different and the concept is different. So what the MNC did is actually even before the COVID, they have already built that huge outsourcing supply chain network. And they have outsourced nearly 90% of their supply chains to the global players. And what happened is they do feel the benefit, right? And when they do have that network, they do have like a second supplier, followed if the preferred supplier in China can't produce the output. So they do have that. And recently, when the sanctions coming up, they faced another issue, which is if I'm shifting the supplier to someone that I have never engaged before, it's very hard for me to qualify the supplier, right? Because they might not comply with certain rules recently issued by US, or maybe they don't have enough data to prove to the US government. I take a very simple example, like in US, they have a recent agreement, I think a few months back, with the Mexico, US, and Canada trade agreement, saying that they need to have more than 40% of all the parts importing into US for car manufacturers that is supplied by suppliers that have a minimum wage of $16 US. So in order to do that, it's not something that can be built in one day. I can't ship a supplier and qualify them and say, hey, you have the wages above $16 per hour. So what we were trying to help them is we built that platform up for them, and we have a pool of suppliers there and we have some scores for suppliers. So if there is a supplier that being qualified before with another customer of us, we will share the score, and they can easily qualify the supplier and and shift when there is not enough output from the number one primary supplier they have recorded in the system. Yep.
Okay. So Inkiat, I saw you reach for the microphone, so I'm going to ask you a question then. So, with the bank's breadth and depth of customers that it interacts with or looks at, yeah? What do you think companies should be looking at? We heard Tharman talk recently about stagflation. I think there are rumors of or worries in the industry with inflation, et cetera, and potentially a recession. What do you think companies should be looking at?
So I took the mic because I wanted to kind of build a few anecdotes of where we see some of the supply chains themselves moving. So if I may start with that. Vietnam has been a real beneficiary, and of course Vietnam went through its own difficulties towards the second quarter, third quarter of last year itself. But through 2020, we've seen quite a bit of supply chains think about actual contract manufacturing, working with some of the EMS players to see volumes in Vietnam itself. So I think that was an immediate beneficiary. We saw some of the companies, whether it was COVID, whether it was geopolitical tensions, actually set up manufacturing operations in Malaysia. And to make sure that they qualify under, to avoid the tariffs that some of the US market was placing upon Chinese companies. So much so that US is now thinking of looking at tariffs for the solar panels, for example, coming out from Malaysia, because some of the Chinese companies are really manufacturing out in Malaysia itself. So all these geopolitical tensions come in, but we have seen some of our MNC clients so-called look into some of these geopolitical shifts. So some anecdotes there. I think further down the horizon, very much we feel that the polarized world will not go away. If you look at, for example, the tariffs that are looking at, that we see, I mean, very simple stuff and perhaps closer to heart is how Malaysia decided not to export their chickens. And if you remember the palm oil ban that Indonesia just extended, yeah, it was come and gone within the month. And so there are lots more geopolitical tensions nowadays you see. It all points towards, it's the usual anecdote, agile, supply chains, but building that agility is really a long-term journey. So I think that's going to be a major topic that we'll have over the next few years. To your point on stagflation as well, is how do you then buy options for yourself? And that lends itself again to the point about agility. For shippers, looking at your bill of materials and scrutinizing whether you have critical potential points of failure, greater visibility to the point on digital twins, all those are existential conversations I think companies will essentially need to have. And then for at least the bank itself, it's about coming alongside and giving you that flavor of the geopolitical happenings or potential circumstances, even as we look at elections and geopolitical changes in the region.
Thanks, Inkiat. Before I continue, I'm going to throw it open to the floor. Yeah, we've got a great cross-section of speakers here. The startup, we've got the established 3PL, a couple of technology providers. I see a gentleman here looking for the microphone, and a bank. Questions from the floor for our panel? Kendrick, you had a question? Yes?
You get extra lunch.
No one's interested to know what the next 12 months or what the future holds. Well, I'll ask that question then. So, whether it's your bank or your company, what's changed in your outlook in the last, say, quarter with the developments that we've seen with inflation, with the Ukraine situation, with the lockdowns in China? What's been your... has there been or a change in outlook in your organizations as you emerge into this new normal? Martin?
Yeah, sure. So I think I really kind of benefit from the new normal as a salesman because previously, before the COVID kicks, whenever I want to meet a customer, I have to bring my consultants here, right? And As I mentioned before, the E2 Open really has a huge portfolio of products, ranging from the ones for manufacturers, for 3PLs, for last mile delivery, for global trade management. So my consultant here won't have the domain expertise in depth in each and every of those modules, right? And what happened now is I can easily grab the domain experts from US, from Europe, with the domain knowledge whenever I deliver a demo, because people get used to the new normal of get things on web, on Zoom, and it's easier to block their time as well. And I can easily bring the expert. If someone in Singapore, for example, a semiconductor company came to me, they want to know more about how to orchestrate their supply chain, match demand and supply, I can easily grab the most experienced consultant who did the project in US for AMD and NVIDIA. Yep. So yeah, that's good for me. Yeah.
Okay. I have a question from the gentleman in the front, please. Microphone for him.
I have a question with Mr. Patrick. My name is Arun. I'm from Bloom Global. So one of the challenges that you just mentioned in the start of the presentation, where you said, the end customer wants to have the cheaper delivery versus the driver, they want to earn as much as they can, right? So, and for that, we see sometimes there can be a longer route taken, or maybe, in case of Uber, we see sometimes the cancellations and whatnot, right? So what is it that you are doing to solve that problem or balance that out? So yeah, I'd like to hear from you.
So I think that, so his question is with customers wanting cheaper deliveries and drivers wanting to earn more, how do I strike a balance, if that's your question? I think, first of all, from a driver perspective, a driver partner perspective, we've got two kinds of driver. One is your ad hoc on-demand drivers, and then we have the contracted drivers. I think it's not so much they want to earn more, like, want to take advantage of the situation, but it's more of getting a bit more revenue or earnings, so to cover the increase in costs. How we are addressing that is two things. First of all, we are approaching our clients to sort of put a case to them to say, hey, these are the certain costs, and we reach some sort of agreement. So I'm not saying all clients, all of my client shippers agree to that, but there are some that are very understanding, and they have worked with us to develop a solution to say, okay, for this 3 months, I'm going to increase based on the percentage costs of transportation, for example. So they are then contributing a certain buffer that goes to the drivers. And then on the other extreme also is there are drivers that we are prepared to work with them in a sense that we eat a bit into our margins. I mean, our margins are not fantastic, but we are prepared in this short term to subsidize or to then fund some of these increased costs to our driver partners to allow them to stay on a platform or to allow them to continue to take the jobs that we are offering them. It is also about all the standard stuff, right? We talk about optimizing the routes and stuff like that and to maximize their trips. But yeah, it's working two ends of the equation, the customer side as well as the driver side, to meet that.
So it's a balancing act, yeah? And I think, when we had dinner a few months ago, one of the things that I found quite interesting about GoGoX, I hope I'm allowed to say this, but is that you're actually in the black. And so, that which is a bit unusual in this space, right? You've got all those examples that we always hear about and people rant about, but actually they're not profitable, which in your case you are. So that's quite interesting. The question at the back of the room, please. Back of the room. Yeah. The gentleman who had, yep.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jaya. I'm a VP Global Procurement from Schneider Electric. I have actually, first of all, I think the title should be Decide Business and Social Outcomes. Maybe that might be nicer, to be honest. I actually have two comments. One is that I would like a request actually from guys like Gojek, Siva, and so on. I think, and this subscribes to the point that I believe Mark brought up when he talked about kids nowadays, spoiled brats and so on. It's more of how do you guys can help us as an ecosystem together, change customer behavior. Okay, where I'm alluding to is that imagine a world where the guys from Gojek and the like, and Patrick, you were talking about it briefly earlier, where every delivery when you make, whether it's especially non-essential delivery, every time someone makes a non-essential delivery, you are actually telling the end customer, telling him that if you go on a different time zone, you get it cheaper, number one. Number two, if you actually go on a different time zone, you will actually be saving so much more of emissions, which is equivalent to killing less 2 trees. If those and this is possible today with technology, right? And I think you guys can play a tremendous part because the e-commerce that is blowing out of proportion will continue to have CO2 emissions at the uncontrollable level. There's no stopping, right? And to the point of, I believe, Mark, this is how human behavior. We want everything yesterday, right? So you can make a lot of difference in the end customer. On the enterprise side, it's slightly different. So the guys like Siva, for example, the challenge for you guys and all the other blue and red, yellow guys sitting in the room here is, can you imagine if tomorrow for every shipment that you do, you ship a half a container, you actually tell the customer, it can be a Schneider, it can be anybody for the matter, at that level of granularity and tell them, guys, today you ship so much, yeah, we ship at certain cost, but you also have emission of so much, which is equivalent to killing how much of trees. And if you take it, and I'm being very ambitious here, I apologize, but if you take it to the air shipment and to your truck, and trucking is one of the biggest animals around, right, for emission. So actually, where I'm coming from is the whole idea of how do we now change our attention to change customer behaviors, not just end user, also enterprise customers. Because today, right now, what's happening is that most of the shippers are asking the freight forwarders, right, the Sivas of the world, what's the CO2 emission, what is this, and you report to us, right? That's what's happening everywhere. But can you imagine if you reverse the plate and you guys come back to us and tell us, hey, Mr. End Customer, this is what you have done for every shipment, no? For every Gojek shipment of delivery. And this is how much of trees you have killed. And I mean, I use the word killed, it's too much, it's too strong a word, but you get my point. And same for Siva. If you can do the same thing back to every enterprise customer, I think you will change the customer's behavior. And that would be, I think, wonderful, to Mark's point earlier. Thanks.
Gentlemen, Ben?
Yeah, if I may, I was really impressed with that question. And just for the audience, I come from an environmental science background, so it's absolutely near and dear to my heart. So we've got some great news there. So we've got a MySiva platform, which is the abilities to do the bookings and the quotations indeed. Now we can have port-to-port pairings, we can have mode of transport, whether that's ocean, whether that's air, whether that's ground, and it does measure the CO2 emissions. So that puts the power and the choice back to the customer to choose that service which is most relevant. But I think you took it a step further. What can we then do to show examples where there might be a better mode? What can we then do to say, well, you probably could have fit 3-4 more cubic metres in that 40-foot container, for example. So how do we use the data that we have to then better inform our customers? Now, we certainly are doing this on occasion, but I think it's fair to say there is room for improvement. Now, as part of that, though, I said at the start of this session, continual improvement and innovation. These are the types of activities that we are looking at. These are certainly the types of activities where we want to be reporting this back to all customers so we can make informed choices.
Raymond, let me add to that. I just feel that if you're not already looking into it, I think you should, because clients, especially your larger ones, are increasingly wanting to look into it as part of their overall Scope 3 considerations. So if you've not begun to count the cost of your sustainability requirements and then add that to the overall solutions that you have, I think that's a time that you need to look at.
But you know, it raises the question, should the tail be wagging the dog or the dog wagging the tail? No offense to any of you gentlemen, but you guys are the tail, not the dog. But very often what happens with 3PLs or service providers is you try and dictate to the industry, correctly or incorrectly, how you'd like to see us behave. On the other hand, will the shippers actually get their acts together and convey or relate, whether it's an ESG perspective, shipping more efficiently. So it's an interesting conundrum that at the society we argue and comment about quite a fair bit. And that's actually the reason why we're running those sessions at lunch that are limited to just shippers to attend, because we're hoping that the dog wags the tail and not the other way around. Okay. So in the interest of time, do we have any other last questions from the floor? Yes, front and center here. Gentlemen, stop looking at each other, please, and look at, here, question.
Hi, Stephanie Krishnan, IDC. Just with regards to some of the comments that have been made around business continuity planning or building up that resilience and reducing risk in the supply chain. You know, risk is something that nobody cares about until something happens, and we've seen that happen a lot in the last 2 years. As COVID declines, or the impact of COVID declines, what impact do you think BCP is going to have on your relative, you know, or what you see in the global economy and the businesses that you drive? Will that still continue to be a question that's, or I guess a concern that organisations say that they want to still follow? Is resiliency still going to be important, or are we going to start going, excuse me, start going back towards lean, cutting costs, you know, that sort of focus that got us into this mess in the first place?
Yeah, thank you. Maybe I'll answer one of the specific points where we've experienced two kind of cases recently because of the COVID. First is the ships were not operating as normal, so they were cutting their schedule, so there were a lot of blank sailings. So what do people do? Instead of shipping, I'm going to go by train. So you know, there's the kind of China to Europe as an example. The US not an issue because we connected to all the Class 1 railroads, so that's not an issue. But for the Asia to Europe, you have to cross to 7 countries, including Russia, all right? And you know what happened now? You can't cross Russia. So what's happened? So you have to, I've got to figure out sea air, yeah, CC, air, but not rail, China. So that's one thing. The other thing is, we just recently experienced as well, we bought over a company called LifeSource, it's all about dynamic sourcing, connecting to all the suppliers, etc. Very timely, actually, because it's European headquartered, a lot of strength in US, etc. And a lot, of course, European manufacturing or outsourcing, they outsource to a lot of the Eastern European areas, including Russia. And what happened? Russia sanctions. So a lot of rush to nearshoring and also Asia. So that's, to answer your question, I think long-term, risk will always play at board level. I think there's a discussion this morning about, supply chain is an afterthought, right? Yeah, we look at finance, but now I think risk management, supply chain risk is always at the top of the agenda in any board papers, I think. That's my gut feel, yeah, to answer you.
Okay, thanks, Mark. So,
Raymond, let me just add to that then.
Please, Inkiat.
If I look at, again, going back to the bans and the polarized world, sorry to keep on using that term, but I think it's a reality that we have to face. So in terms of disruptions and business continuity, I think companies will continue to face some of that now. The tools, I mean, people talk about the metaverse, right, nowadays, and therefore the tools for virtualization and visualization is also becoming much more accessible. So I think organizations will either, those who can afford to, build that in-house, or the likes of CMA, CGM, and MERS will then do M&As and then acquire that solution as an offering to clients. So like it either way, you either do it in-house or the service providers will get increasingly competent for them to enable you to manage that risk. And I think there are quite a fair bit of consultants who will continue to come alongside you and say, have you considered whether your critical components and supplies are actually well managed and safeguarded? And then look into different alternatives and options. So I think because of that, it will continue to be a core conversation, but because also it becomes much more of an accessible conversation as well.
Thanks, Inkiat. With that, I'm going to start with you, Mark, so that you're not last again. Some closing remarks, a takeaway that you'd like to leave with the audience today.
Okay. Thank you, Roman. Since I started saying we are spoiled brats and prince and kings and queens, etc., I'll stop it. Don't have too much chicken over lunch. Because you know now in Singapore itself they have an issue with the sourcing of chickens, am I correct? And then there's an issue now with India with the Ukraine issue because you're not having enough vegetable oil. So don't have too much fried stuff. So to come back to Jaya's point, I think we as consumers can manage the situation, and it's not all that bad, all right? So stay safe and look forward to hearing from you at lunch. And don't beat me up, please, for calling you all spoiled brats, okay? Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks. I'm going to go a bit left wing down here and talk about a bit of a geographical supply chain opportunity. I think what we're seeing in terms of Southeast Asia, at least, is that those beyond the top 5, top 10, MNCs in these various areas, I think the Koreans, the Japanese, I mean, if you think about Nitori expanding out in Southeast Asia, this is new generation of large, so-called mid-size, because they're not top 5, but they're still fairly sizable, expanding in Southeast Asia. Furthermore, the Hyundais of the world, etc., expanding some of their supply chains out to Southeast Asia as well, and then thinking of bringing their whole cohort of suppliers out there. And that's even not mentioning the whole concerns with too much vested interest in China as we speak. So if we think about that, I think there is going to be a range of opportunities for shippers, for actually service providers, to think about targeting that next tier in order to see that growth out for logistics services in the region itself. Thanks.
Thank you, Martin.
Yep. So I think to wrap this up, right? In order to to deliver the business outcome in the future, right? So while we are still recovering from the COVID, I can see a lot of our MNC customers are already focusing on the ESG growth, right? And some of the Southeast Asian companies are still catching up to sourcing the alternative suppliers. So I think this is something that we need to catch up and focus on, like not only rely on what's the supply chain in the past, but also look at what is going to happen in the next 5 or 10 years. Monitor your carbon emission, as mentioned earlier. We are building the softwares to support all this. Yeah.
Thank you, Ben.
Okay, so I think keep attending events like these and others. This is where we have open dialogue. This is where we share. This is where we innovate. This is where we improve. And I think just to touch on, I really like the question again about sustainability and those options. I think everything we have choices here, and we can steer where the conversations go in supply chain. So I think definitely make sure sustainability is right up there amongst one of the top initiatives that we're working on.
Thank you. And the polarized Patrick.
Polarized Patrick. Okay, I'm gonna end with a lighter note. I think Mark mentioned about spoiled brats. I think in reality we are in some shape and form spoiled brats. We have a client, once in a while we get complaints, right? Complaints by email. Your guy came late. Your guy didn't deliver. But these days the emails, not only do they send to the Singapore office, they CC the whole board of directors of Europe, right? This is how you guys are doing business in Singapore. But that's the reality. So the next time some guy delivers your Shopee package, I think 90% of you guys would have received something from Lazada, Shopee, GrabFood. Tip the guy, right? Hey, offer him a drink because, and when it's raining, don't expect your food to come on time, all right? So thank you all.
Thanks, Patrick. So to end off, according to Mark, the spoiled brats, the consumers can control the situation. A bit optimistic, I think, but fair enough. With Inkiat, maybe we can look at the tier 2s. Yes, there's a range of opportunities out there, not just looking at large multinationals or looking to Europe or US all the time. And something that's come across quite strongly in this panel is what Martin said, ESG and growth in Southeast Asia. I think we are fairly behind in looking at this, yeah? And then, of course, Patrick, make sure you tip your driver, yeah? But the best message, I think, and I'm a bit biased here, came from Ben. Attend more LogiSYM events, and keep that dialogue going. So with that, thank you very much, and back to you.